The turkey was golden, the laughter was fake, and the tension could slice through the gravy. That's how Thanksgiving looked at my father's house that year. Perfect on the outside, poisoned on the inside. Everyone was there. My successful brother with his perfect family, my gossiping aunts comparing casseroles, and my father, sitting at the head of the table like a king in a kingdom built on silence. And then there was me, the ungrateful one. It started when I didn't raise a toast. Apparently, that was enough to question my family values. My father leaned back in his chair, glass in hand, and said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Some people forget who gave them everything. Then, the word that burned deeper than any insult, ungrateful. The room froze. The fork stopped moving. The sound of the clock suddenly became the loudest thing in the world. I wanted to laugh, not cry. The irony was too much, because if only they knew what I had given up for this family. You see, my name's Rachel, and once upon a time I was the one who held this family together. When Mom died, I was 16, too young to understand grief, but old enough to clean, cook, and pretend everything was fine. While my brother went off to college, I stayed home to keep the house from falling apart. Funny how love gets twisted into duty, and duty gets mistaken for debt. That night, when my father called me ungrateful, something inside me cracked, not from anger, but from clarity. I looked around that table, at people who only remembered my mistakes, never my sacrifices, and I realized I didn't belong to them anymore. Not emotionally, not spiritually, but don't get it wrong. This wasn't my downfall, it was my awakening. Because sometimes being called ungrateful is the first step toward remembering your own worth. So how did I go from the invisible daughter in a broken family to standing up in that same dining room saying words they'd never forget? Let's rewind, before the dinner, before the label, before the silence that swallowed me whole. This story isn't about revenge. It's about remembering who you are, even when the people who raised you forget. Welcome, story lovers. From where are you watching? Drop your city name in the comments. Let's see how far our story travels tonight. Rachel wasn't born angry. She was born hopeful. A middle-class girl from Pennsylvania, raised on casseroles, Sunday chores, and the belief that good things come to those who keep quiet. Her mother was gentle, the kind of woman who made every birthday feel like a holiday and every mistake feel forgivable. Her father, on the other hand, believed love was earned through obedience, respect, and silence. Rachel grew up watching her mother smooth over every argument, apologize for every misunderstanding, and keep peace at any cost. So Rachel learned early that silence was safer than truth. That lesson would shape the rest of her life. She wasn't ordinary. In high school, she was brilliant, curious, artistic, always chasing meaning in small things. She dreamed of studying psychology, maybe even opening a counseling center one day for women who felt unseen. Her teachers adored her, her friends confided in her, and her mother often said, "You have a gift for understanding hearts." But the gift became a curse the year her mother got sick. Cancer, the word that emptied the air from every room. It began with fatigue and doctor visits that her father insisted were nothing serious. By the time he accepted the truth, it was too late. Her mother faded like autumn light, beautiful, brief, and gone before anyone was ready. Rachel was 16 when she stopped being a daughter and became a caretaker. She cooked dinner while pretending not to cry over burnt onions. She helped her brother with homework and tucked him in while her father sat in the living room, silent, staring at unpaid bills. She learned to balance grief and survival like a tightrope. One slip and everything would fall. Her friends went to prom. She went to pharmacy counters. Her classmates filled college applications. She filled grocery lists. When her brother left for college, promising to come back soon, Rachel stayed behind. Someone had to. Her father said, "You're good at keeping things together. I need you here." And that was that. Her dreams were folded neatly and tucked away in a drawer that no one ever opened again. Years passed like that, one sacrifice after another, quiet and invisible. She worked part-time jobs at local diners, then full-time at a hardware store, saving just enough to keep the house running. When her father lost his job, she picked up extra shifts. When he started drinking to relax, she made excuses for him. And when he yelled, she apologized. Even when she wasn't wrong. There's a strange kind of loyalty that grows from pain. The kind that convinces you love means staying no matter how much it hurts. Rachel stayed, even when her friends moved to other cities, even when her brother stopped calling as often, even when the house stopped feeling like home. But she had small acts of rebellion, tiny flickers of self that refused to die. She kept her mother's old psychology books hidden in her closet. She read them late at night, highlighting sentences about healing, trauma, and self-worth. Sometimes she'd imagine herself in an office, helping someone else untangle the same kind of pain she lived through. It was her quiet way of reminding herself that she was more than her chores, more than her father's disappointment. Life didn't give her big tragedies after her mother's death, just 1,000 small heartbreaks that added up. A promotion she never took because her father needed help at home. A relationship she ended because he didn't fit the family. Birthdays forgotten. Holidays spent serving instead of celebrating. By 30, she had become the family's background character, the dependable one, the good daughter, the one who'd never leave. People praised her kindness but never asked what it cost. Her father had a way of using gratitude like a weapon. Whenever she expressed exhaustion, he'd say, "You should be thankful you even have a roof." When she paid his bills, he'd remind her, "You owe this family. We raised you." That word, owe, became a chain around her neck, and she carried it, silently, for years. But there were cracks forming in her quiet obedience. Moments when she looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She wasn't bitter, she was empty. Her life was full of people, yet she felt alone in every room. Then came the Thanksgiving that changed everything. It began like every other. Rachel cooking, cleaning, smiling while everyone else laughed. But beneath the noise, something in her had shifted. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was years of swallowing words. Maybe it was the exhaustion of pretending everything was fine. Whatever it was, she felt it growing. That quiet, dangerous thing called truth. She didn't plan to speak up. She never did. But sometimes silence breaks itself. And when her father raised his glass that night and called her ungrateful, it was like striking a match in a room soaked with gasoline. He had no idea that word would be the one to burn his illusion of control forever. Because what followed wasn't rage or revenge. It was something far stronger. The moment Rachel finally remembered who she used to be. Rachel's breaking point didn't come as an explosion. It came as a whisper. After that Thanksgiving humiliation, she didn't yell or storm out. She just stopped apologizing. Something small but dangerous had shifted. For years, she had lived in a house where her worth was measured by what she did for others. Now, for the first time, she began asking a question that terrified her father the most. What do I want? It started with something simple. She enrolled in a night course at the community college, Introduction to Behavioral Psychology. She didn't tell anyone, of course. Her father would have laughed, said it was a waste of money or a midlife crisis. But Rachel went anyway. The classroom was full of young students, people half her age who scrolled their phones during lectures. But Rachel, she sat in the front row, notebook open, eyes hungry. Every slide about trauma, conditioning, and emotional boundaries hit home. It wasn't just theory. It was her life, dissected in PowerPoint format. Her professor, Dr. Green, noticed her immediately. He was one of those rare teachers who actually looked into people, not just at them. After a few classes, he pulled her aside and said, "You have a natural empathy, Rachel. Most people learn psychology to understand others. You already do. You're just learning the language for it." It was the first kind word from a man in years that didn't come wrapped in obligation. That moment changed something. For the first time since her mother's death, Rachel felt seen, not as a daughter or caretaker or helper, but as a person. But new light always threatens those who live comfortably in the dark. When her father found out, accidentally, through a neighbor who saw her at the college, his reaction was predictable and cruel. "So you're too good for your family now?" he said, voice dripping with mockery. "Education doesn't fix ingratitude." The word again. like a hammer hitting the same bruise. Rachel didn't argue, not then. But that night, she looked around the house and realized how much of herself she had left behind. The hobbies she gave up, the friends she lost touch with, the life she paused indefinitely. She was done waiting for permission to live. Then came the second spark, the one that would turn everything upside down. At her night job, part-time at a local nonprofit that provided mental health support, Rachel stumbled upon something she wasn't supposed to see. She had joined the nonprofit as a receptionist, just to earn some extra income and stay connected to her passion for psychology. But one evening when she was locking up, she noticed a stack of papers left on the printer. Grant applications, funding requests, and one line caught her eye, the signature of the director, Mr. Laird, under a number that didn't match the official grant total. Rachel wasn't an accountant, but she'd spent years balancing her father's bills and managing tight finances. Something was off. She double-checked the files in the computer system. The organization had received $120,000 for community outreach, but only $70,000 was listed in the internal records. $50,000. Gone. Her stomach tightened. She could have ignored it. It wasn't her business. She was just a receptionist after all. But silence had already cost her too much in life. That night, she took the documents home and sat on her bed, staring at them for hours. Every moral, every boundary, every fear from her past whispered in her head. Don't make trouble. Don't speak out. You'll lose everything. But another voice, faint but fierce, said, You've already lost enough. Rachel started digging quietly. Not to expose anyone, just to understand. She went through old grant reports, donor letters, and public statements. The numbers never matched. Someone was siphoning funds meant for therapy sessions and crisis outreach. Money meant for people like her, the broken, the unheard. Her chest burned with anger, but also purpose. For the first time in years, she wasn't helpless. She was holding proof. And with that proof came a choice. Stay silent and keep her job. Or speak up and risk everything. Dr. Green's words echoed in her mind. Empathy without boundaries becomes self-destruction. So she made a plan. She documented everything. Emails, timestamps, scanned copies. She even contacted a small online journalist who specialized in local corruption stories, anonymously, using a borrowed laptop from a classmate. But the closer she got to exposing the truth, the more her world began to shake. The nonprofit's director grew suspicious. Her father grew angrier at her late nights and strange behavior. Her brother, who only called once in a while, accused her of being dramatic and making problems where there were none. Every man in her life was trying to silence her. Again. And this time, she realized, their fear of her voice was the clearest sign she was finally using it. Then came the night of confrontation at work. Mr. Laird cornered her after hours, his tone falsely friendly. He said he'd heard rumors that she'd been asking about grant records. Rachel's heart raced, but she stayed calm. She told him she was just learning, just curious about how nonprofits handled funds. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'd be careful, Rachel, he said. People don't like ungrateful employees. That word again. Different man, same poison. She smiled back in a small, dangerous smile. Then maybe they should stop giving people reasons to be. That was the moment the old Rachel, the obedient daughter, the silent caretaker, quietly died. Over the next week, she finalized her report, sent it to the journalist, and resigned from the job. It was terrifying, liberating, and utterly final. The story broke 2 weeks later. Local headlines: Nonprofit director under investigation for misuse of funds. The town buzzed. The board was dissolved. The victims finally received the money owed to them. Rachel didn't take credit. She didn't need to. But for the first time in decades, she felt a peace that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Yet back home, that peace came at a price. Her father's silence turned to hostility. Her brother stopped visiting altogether. They said she was bringing shame. But Rachel wasn't ashamed. She was awake. And soon, At one final family dinner, the truth she carried would collide with the family that still called her ungrateful. And this time, she wouldn't swallow it. She'd serve it cold. The next Thanksgiving came faster than Rachel expected. Same house, same table, same faces that pretended last year never happened. But this time, something was different. She was different. She had her own small apartment now, a certificate in psychology framed on the wall, and a quiet sense of peace that didn't depend on anyone's approval. But when her father called and said, "It would mean a lot if you came," she hesitated. Part of her wanted to stay away. Another part, the part that still longed to be understood, said yes. So there she was again, 1 year later, standing in that same kitchen, stirring gravy and swallowing memories. The table looked perfect like always. Golden turkey, crystal glasses, silver napkins, but the air carried the same old poison, tension wrapped in politeness. Her father sat at the head as always. Her brother was there too, scrolling on his phone, pretending not to see her. The laughter felt rehearsed. The compliments felt hollow. And then, as if the universe demanded repetition, it happened again. Her father raised his glass, eyes glinting. "Well," he said, "I'm thankful for the family members who remember where they came from, and who didn't forget who paid their bills growing up." The room went quiet, just like last year. Her brother snickered. Someone coughed. Rachel felt the burn rise in her chest. That word, ungrateful, hung in the air, unspoken but alive. She could have let it slide, like always. But silence wasn't her language anymore. She set her fork down. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. "Dad," she said, "you talk a lot about what you gave. But maybe it's time we talk about what it cost." He blinked. "Excuse me?" The whole table froze. Rachel took a deep breath. "You remember when Mom got sick? I was 16. You said you needed me to stay home. So I did. I gave up college, scholarships, a future. You called that loyalty. I called it love. But maybe it was something else. Maybe it was fear." Her father's face tightened. "Watch your tone, Rachel." "No," she said quietly. "You've had my silence for 20 years. Tonight you'll have my truth." Her brother laughed nervously. "Come on, Rach, not this again." She turned to him, eyes steady. "You got to live your life while I kept everything running here. You were the son who succeeded. I was the daughter who served." "Don't come on, Rach me!" Her father slammed his fork down. "You're being disrespectful." She met his glare. "No, I'm being honest." The room pulsed with tension, plates untouched, eyes darting between father and daughter. Rachel stood slowly, her voice shaking but strong. "You called me ungrateful because I finally stopped living my life for you. But you never saw the nights I stayed up paying your bills. You never thanked me for giving up my 20s to take care of this house. You just took my time, my peace, my dreams, and called it duty." Her aunt whispered something, but no one dared interrupt. She continued, voice rising with every word. "And when I tried to build something of my own, a job, an education, a life, you called it betrayal. Because in your mind, gratitude means obedience. But I'm done mistaking guilt for love." Her father's face turned red. "You've been brainwashed by those classes, haven't you? All that psychology garbage, making excuses for selfishness." Rachel smiled sadly. "You know what psychology taught me, Dad? That people who demand gratitude for doing the bare minimum aren't generous. They're controlling." The silence was deafening. Her brother muttered, "You should just apologize, Rachel." She turned to him. "Apologize? For wanting to be free? For wanting more than to clean up everyone else's mess?" "No, not this time." Her father's hand shook as he picked up his drink. "You think you're better than us now?" Rachel stepped forward, tears welling, but her voice unbroken. "No, Dad, I just finally know I'm not less." And then she did something no one expected. She reached into her purse and placed a folded newspaper on the table. The headline from the local scandal: "Nonprofit director arrested for fraud. Anonymous whistleblower credited." Her father frowned. "What's this supposed to mean?" "It means," she said softly, "I stopped being afraid of people who use power to control others." Whether it's a corrupt boss or a father who calls his daughter ungrateful for wanting a life, the realization hit him like a wave. His voice faltered.
You did that?
Yes, and I don't regret it. Just like I don't regret standing here tonight. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. Her father looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time in years, his face softened with something that looked like guilt. Rachel felt the weight lift from her shoulders. She didn't need his apology. His silence was enough. She picked up her coat, turned toward the door, and smiled faintly. "Dinner's great, Dad, but I've already had my fill." And with that, she walked out. Not as the broken girl who once lived in his shadow, but as a woman who finally understood her worth. Behind her, the room stayed frozen, forks mid-air, eyes wide, hearts heavy. And for the first time in her life, the silence in that house wasn't hers to carry. Dear audience, if you're still with me and felt that moment hit deep, don't forget to give this story a like. It really helps this message reach more hearts like yours. Winter faded into spring before Rachel set foot near her family again. In those quiet months alone, she learned something her childhood never taught her. Peace doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from accepting yourself. Her apartment, though small, felt alive. Every corner was hers. The shelves lined with second-hand books, the window filled with plants she kept alive just to remind herself that care could be gentle, not draining. She had taken a job counseling women who were recovering from emotional abuse and family control, women who once felt small, voiceless, and guilty for wanting freedom. Each story she heard was like a mirror, painful, honest, and healing all at once. When she spoke to them, she didn't use big words or therapy jargon. She just said, "You're not ungrateful for wanting peace." And every time she did, someone cried, sometimes her, sometimes them. It became her quiet mission to help others find the voice she almost lost. Her life wasn't perfect. Bills piled up, loneliness lingered, and holidays were hard. But there was dignity in her independence. She no longer performed gratitude. She lived it, through purpose, not guilt. Then, one ordinary afternoon, she got a call. It was her brother. He hesitated before speaking. "Dad's not doing well. He asks about you sometimes." Rachel felt her heart tighten, but not the way it once did. There was no anger left, and just understanding. Years of resentment had burned away into quiet compassion. She went to see him that weekend. The house looked smaller than she remembered, the paint faded, the lawn unkept. Her father sat by the window, thinner, softer somehow. When he saw her, he didn't try to hide his surprise. "Rachel," he said, voice rough. "You came," she smiled faintly. "I didn't come to argue, Dad," he nodded slowly. "I know. For a long time, neither spoke. Just silence, the kind that didn't choke this time. Finally, he said, 'You were right. I thought gratitude meant control. I didn't see what I was taking from you.'" His eyes glistened, something she had never seen in them before. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for calling you ungrateful. When you were the only one who gave." Rachel didn't cry. She didn't need to. Some apologies don't erase pain. They just close the door gently so healing can begin. She placed her hand over his and said, "I know you did the best you could, and now I'm doing the same." When she left that day, she didn't feel victorious. She felt free. Freedom, she realized, isn't loud. It's the quiet certainty that you can walk away without bitterness. A year later, Rachel's name appeared in a local magazine, Community Voices, Women Who Empower. The article described her nonprofit, Second Voice, a counseling and education center that trained women to rebuild their confidence, careers, and sense of worth. The photo showed Rachel standing in a bright room full of women, some smiling, some crying, all finding new beginnings. When the interviewer asked what inspired her, she simply said, "Once, someone called me ungrateful for standing up for myself. I believed it for a long time. Now I know. Self-respect is the purest form of gratitude to God." At that same moment, miles away, her father sat in his living room reading that very article. He didn't say much, but his wife noticed the way his eyes softened, the small smile that flickered and disappeared. He folded the page neatly and placed it in a drawer beside an old photo. Rachel at 16, holding a Thanksgiving pie, smiling shyly at the camera. That night, he whispered to no one. She finally found her voice, and I finally learned to listen. As for Rachel, Thanksgiving no longer meant proving her worth. It became a day of service. She cooked with her students at the center, shared stories of resilience, and wrote thank you letters to herself for surviving. There was laughter, music, and peace, the kind her childhood never allowed. She would sometimes think back to that night. The dinner table, the silence, the breaking point. But instead of pain, she now felt gratitude, the real kind.